Hi, welcome to Essential Japanese for Beginners. My name is Shu and I'm your teacher. You can call me Shu Sensei. In this course, we have 5 lessons, and by the end of the course, you will be able to introduce yourself in Japanese, pronounce all the sounds in Japanese. You will be able to read both katakana and hiragana. Those are the Japanese characters. And also you will learn essential words and phrases, and also essential information that you need to know when learning Japanese. Not a lot of Japanese schools will teach you this because they're not necessarily aware how important these things are to English speakers or anybody who speaks European languages. For instance, we don't have the concept of I. We don't have first person point of view. The concept of subject doesn't exist in Japanese. Also, we have this concept of negative politeness, which is very, very important in the language and in the culture. And these pieces of information will definitely help you if you decide to continue to learn Japanese. So, are you excited? I'm very excited. So let's get started. So let's take a look at lesson plan. Lesson 1, basic phrases and introducing yourself. Lesson 2, Japanese culture and basics of Japanese. Lesson 3, essential phrases, transportation. Lesson 4, essential phrases, restaurants. Lesson 5, essential phrases, general. Now today we're going to cover lesson 1, basic phrases and introducing yourself. And lesson 2, 3, 4, and 5 will be covered in different videos. But I will just go over these lessons, lesson 2, 3, 4, 5, briefly so that you have an idea what we're going to learn in these lessons. First, lesson 2, Japanese culture and basics of Japanese. You will learn the Japanese culture as well as historical background, how they are deeply connected to the Japanese language. And also the basics of Japanese will cover the pronunciation of all the Japanese sounds, and you will learn how to read Japanese letters, which are hiragana and katakana. It's a big lesson and you will learn a lot in this lesson. Lesson 3, 4, 5, they are essential phrases. Although I have used specific situations for these lessons, it doesn't mean that you will only be able to use these phrases in these specific situations. You will be able to use these phrases in many different situations. I'm just using them as examples to give you an idea how to use them. These phrases that you will learn are very versatile and useful, so you will be able to use in many different situations. So yeah, let's go to lesson number 1. Lesson number 1, here it is. It's basic phrases and introducing yourself. The goals are learn basic phrases and words in Japanese, learn how to introduce yourself in Japanese. So this is the very first page. Let's take a look at this because I need you to understand how this table works. If you take a look at this table right here, on the far left there is a Japanese phrase. There's the pronunciation, and translation, and literal translation. So how does this work? First of all, Japanese phrase, it's written in Japanese as you can see, and the pronunciation next to it explains how to pronounce this. And the next to pronunciation on the right is translation. This is how you would say in English, if you were to say it in English. And the literal translation, this is not a really good example here because it's exactly the same. But in reality, what are we saying in Japanese? Translation is more like an interpretation, whereas literal translation is really what we're saying. And also, let's take a look at this pronunciation part here. This is something I've come up with, and this is something that nobody really teaches you, in my opinion, but I think very essential, which is the intonation of the phrase or the word. In Japanese, basically there are 2 sounds. There's the lower sound and there's the higher sound. And the intonation is different in each region. So what I'm teaching you is the Tokyo intonation. So it's the most basic one, the standard Japanese. But of course, if you go to Kyoto or Osaka, they have different intonation. So this is not the only way to say it. But to give you an idea how to pronounce it correctly in standard Japanese, I think knowing this two sounds, the fact that two sounds exist in Japanese, is very helpful, I think. So when I write the pronunciation in lowercase, in this case, right here, O is small and Hayo is big, uppercase, which means O is a little lower and Hayo is a little higher. So in terms of pronunciation, you go from low to a little high. And here you see this bar right here. This is extending the sound prior to the bar. So if I were to pronounce this, Ohayo, Ohayo. So O is a little low, Hayo is a little high. So Ohayo gozaimasu. So Go is a little low, Zaima is a little high, and Su is a little low. So you can tell how to pronounce by looking at this. But like I said, in different regions, they have different intonation and stuff. So I wouldn't say you have to master this, but if you are not sure, you can kind of come back to this book and find out. So let's take a look at these three phrases right here. Ohayo gozaimasu. First one is good morning. Literal translation is, of course, good morning. The pronunciation is, like I just told you, O is a little low and Hayo is a little high. And you have to extend the O. So Ohayo gozaimasu is the correct way to pronounce it. The pronunciation, I'm going to explain further in detail in lesson 2. But I'm going to give you a little bit of sneak peek, I guess. If you were to pronounce this, like for instance in English, you wouldn't pronounce it the way I did, I guess, because when you have H-A-Y next to each other, why is it not pronounced Heyo or Heyo or whatever? How do I know how to pronounce this? When it's A, it's supposed to be pronounced A. When it's O, it has to be pronounced O. And I is E. E is E. U is U. So basically, if you follow that pattern, you should be able to pronounce by looking at this pronunciation chart. So yeah, Ohayo gozaimasu is pronounced like that. And the next one is konnichiwa. Konnichiwa, which is hello. The pronunciation is konnichiwa. Konnichiwa. So Y is a little higher than the rest. I hear a lot of American people say konnichiwa, or I hear a lot of French people say konnichiwa or something like that. But the correct pronunciation is konnichiwa. Konnichiwa. So konnichiwa. Konnichiwa. Next one is konbanwa. This is good evening. So here, konban is a little low and wa is a little high, just like konnichiwa. So let's practice these phrases. First one is ohayo gozaimasu. So you can repeat after me. I will say the phrase first and I will say repeat after me so you can practice it. Ohayo gozaimasu. Ohayo gozaimasu. Repeat after me. Sounds good. Next one. Konnichiwa. Konnichiwa. Repeat after me. Sounds good. Next one is こんばんは。こんばんは。Great.